Guests, dear students, Your Excellency, I'm truly pleased to welcome you to the Diplomatic Academy, and it's symbolic that we are meeting during the holy month of Ramadan. This is a time of deep spiritual reflection, solidarity, and awareness of our responsibility to society. Ramadan Kareem. Thank you. With this, we especially feel the value of peace, human dignity, and mutual support. For Ukraine, which is resisting full-scale aggression, these values are not only spiritual, they are also directly linked to our national security. We are holding this event in cooperation with the Ukrainian Catholic University, an institution that combines academic excellence, moral responsibility, and active international engagement. Our partnership is more than institutional cooperation. It is also a joint effort to build a new culture of strategic thinking and to prepare professionals who can work effectively in time of global turbulence. The Middle East is one of the key regions for global security and political stability. It directly influences international alliances and the balance of power in the world. For Ukraine, this region is critically important. Important decisions are made here that affect international support for our country, security and energy flows, and mechanism of deterring aggression. That is why I would like to invite to the floor our representative in the Middle East, Ambassador Extraordinary Plenipotentiary of Ukraine to Qatar, Andriy Kuzmenko. He works every day to build bridges between Ukraine and the Arab world, to strengthen diplomatic ties and develop partnerships that are vital for our country's security. Your Excellency, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, dear friends, best wishes from Qatar. I'm really delighted and honored to take part in this very important event, and not since only the typicality of it, typicality is the issue to be considered, but due to the participation in this format, my dear friends, Professor Ashur and Professor Roman Nazarenko, whom we met here in Qatar, and just as a sign of our friendship, I still keeping their books gracefully presented to the embassy, and which stay in our library as a sign of our friendship and partnership. The topic of today's meeting, today's roundtable, is From Ukraine to the Middle East on defense, deterrence, and diplomacy. Most probably, the best contribution to be made by Ukraine on the presence of the Qatari-Ukrainian relations. And I promise not the main speaker of today's event. That is why after greetings, which I am really honored to extend to all the lecturers, organizers, and participants, I would like just briefly make certain bullet points on the bilateral relations of Ukraine and the state of Qatar. It is well known that our diplomatic relations between Ukraine and the state of Qatar were established on April 13, 1993. For the decade, these relations were not dynamic at all. Since I mean Ukraine, the multipolar policy of diplomacy at the time, and traditionally put the main emphasis into the Russia at the time, the biggest strategic partners of previous Ukrainian governments, and United States, which still are the strategic partner of Ukraine, and we see the role United States is playing now. But the first visit of the Ukrainian foreign minister to Qatar took place in the year 2002. It was at the aftermath of 9/11's terroristic attack, and for Ukraine, in fact, it was very important to get understanding of the local realities, regional dynamics, and possible risks. Then the second stage of the Ukraine-Qatari relations started in the year 2009, when Kiev hosted the first round of the political consultations between the state of Qatar and between Ukraine. On one hand, Ukraine main task at the time was to find the possible alternative to the Russian gas we were totally dependent at during that time. From another hand, for Qataris, it was also very important to make, let's say, discovery and research as a field of the European energy market. And after the completing of these consultations, the real breakthrough in relations between our countries took place in the year 2010. Since in October 2011, Qatari Emir Hamad Al Thani visited Ukraine the first time. It was a historic.
We lost you.
2012, Ukrainian Prime Minister visited Doha. In November, President now in Rostov, Qatar. And in the year 2013, we have a step.
There is no electricity in Qatar, it's a problem.
They're getting prepared for the strikes.
Okay. Ambassador, we lost you. Maybe no connection. No connection. Okay. I would like also, I just realized that we have with us another one more ambassador of Ukraine to Jordan, Miroslava Sherbatyuk. Thank you very much for being with us, ambassador. Нема, може в нас зв'язку немає, так? У нас є, так. Окей. It's also
Добрий день, я на
honor-
місці, перепрошую. У нас тут просто сигнал йде з затримкою. Добрий день.
Ми вас вітаємо, дякуємо, що ви з нами. Якщо захочете, потім можете долучитися до нас також і виступити. Дякую вам. Дякую.
Дякую.
It's also a great honor for us to welcome Omar Ashur, Professor of Security and Military Studies at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies in Qatar and the University of Exeter in UK. Thank you, Professor, for being with us despite the cold weather and Russian attacks. It's a great honor for us. Professor Ashur is a unique scholar who combines academic expertise with practical experience. He had founded and led several security studies programs, contributed to the reform of military and diplomatic education, served as a reserve officer, and worked as a senior UN consultant on counter-terrorism. His research covers hybrid defense, combat effectiveness, and military transformation. For us, his analysis of Russia's war against Ukraine is especially important. For the Diplomatic Academy and its fellows,
Якось фотографувати.
for our students online, it's a truly unique opportunity to learn from a world-class scholar. And I'm confident that today's discussion will help us better understand and rethink the cooperation between Ukraine and the Middle East. Dear Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, my dear Ambassador Ostash. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here, despite the cold. And I ran from Montreal because of the cold, but I'd rather be here in Ukraine than in Montreal or any other place for that matter. And I'm learning in the Ukrainian spirit, so I slept the entire night yesterday and the day before yesterday. It didn't. The attacks did not really bother me. Actually, I learned from them from Roman, so thank you for that. The thanks are due as well for the kind organizationship of Professor Roman Lazarenko and Ambassador Enrique Zmenka, my dear friend, who's really has been leading the multiple initiatives in Qatar and the Middle East, whether on defense issues, energy issues, political issues, diplomatic issues, educational issues, and also cultural affairs, including the recent concert that many Qataris and people of the regions enjoyed for Jamala, the very famous, respectful Ukrainian singer. So that is a note to be said. It's not my first time here in the Diplomatic Academy. It's always a pleasure and honor to be here. So thank you very much for the very kind invitation and introduction. So I'm going to talk a bit, maybe for 15, 20 minutes or so, run some trends with you that I see them. Two strategic trends in general, one operational and one tactical. And I'll be happy to also hear the feedback of my co-speaker, Professor Nazarenko. And then we can open up to the audience. Hopefully it will be controversial enough to start a discussion. So on that note, the first strategic, I'm seeing sort of four trends going on, and the four trends are affecting both Ukraine and the Middle East in general. The first trend is the recession of alliances. In many ways, alliances are being deteriorated gradually, and I'll give you a stark example to feel the difference. In August 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, so a large country invading the smaller neighbor, and on bases that are very familiar to you, same language, similar religion, similar ethnicities, and so on. It invaded the country. The country had no security assurances from the US, had no formal defense treaty from the US, had no formal alliance with the US, but in that period, in this moment of 1990, 1991, the United States mobilized 900,000 coalition strong, with about 250,000 US soldiers in it, over 250,000 US soldiers in it, and fought for about 37 days of an air campaign and about 100 hours of ground fighting. So the entire thing took about 40 days, liberated the country and got it back. And then in September 91, it signed the defense treaty after the liberation. Okay, so that's the picture of how alliances worked in this moment of 1991. Okay, fast forward to 2014. 2014, Crimea, one of the most important geostrategic regions of Ukraine, about more than 2.5 times the size of Kuwait, just Crimea. And the Ukraine has given up its strategic insurance in terms of its tactical and nuclear weapons, with security assurances from the United States and the invading country, the Russian Federation, and the United Kingdom in 1994. Okay, there was no 900,000 mobilization to liberate Crimea. There was no 37-day air suppression campaign followed by 100 hours combat on the ground to liberate Crimea. There was nothing, basically. The Obama administration and the Merkel administration advised Ukraine not to fight and told them that you will get back the peninsula with sanctions and with diplomacy, and maybe some pressures that were not heeded. So that does not just affect, that recession of alliances does not just affect us. So the other side is also suffering from that. We saw what happened, for example, on a very on a non-state level on the 7th of October. We know now what the details of what happened. The leadership of Hamas in Gaza prepared that attack, apparently against the advice of everybody else, including its political bureau outside of the country, including the advice of Hezbollah, including the advice of the only regional power that supports them, which is Iran. So against everybody else's advice. And when it happened, the alliance really, or the so-called axis of resistance between quotations, in a way supported, but light support. It was not just sanctions and diplomacy like the US, but they fired missiles, they fired drones, but there was no ground invasion and there was no full support. And in a way, the alliance collapsed. Same thing with when Iran got a very heavy campaign of SIAD, of suppression of air defenses and other aspects. Russia did not do much. Similar situation with Venezuela. We'll see what's going to happen in Cuba. So in a way, that idea to call a 911 international power or nuclear power that will come and help you and assist you and liberate you, like the 1990-1991 moment, it's pretty much over. Implications for that, we'll talk about it in a second, but the main implication is your main insurance is this issue, okay? Your main insurance is your own forces and the friendly forces that are willing to assist. But aside from that, don't rely on an alliance. And I'm saying this for a reason, because it's relevant today with the current administration in the US and with its current rhetoric. And I know the people like to talk about cards these days. And I've been telling colleagues earlier, I was giving a short course for some of the defense analysts here. My message was, you do have cards, you do have cards. The other side maybe does not have enough pressure cards in terms of, and we can discuss this a bit in details. So that's my first trend. Let me put the stopwatch so I don't run out of time as usual. So that's my first trends on the recession of alliance. The second trend, which is related and it's also strategic, is the recession of deterrence as well. So if you think about it, Ukraine should, if you're thinking about deterrence between 2014 and 2022, Ukraine should not have been invaded. And 7 October should not have had happened. Why? Between 2014 and 2022, Ukraine invested in its defenses. According to people I spoke to in 2014, the ready to fight, the brigades that were ready to fight between 2014 or pre-2014 and pre-2022, it was 7 times more. So they were about 3 in 2014, in 2013, 2014. They became 21 maneuver brigades before 2022. So you can see that there is a trajectory here of investment in the defense. Ukraine was by far the largest ground-based air defense park in Europe. Nobody else had in terms of the quantity and in terms of the layers of the system, so the short range, mid range, and long range. Also, it was very clear that Ukraine is not going to accept another Crimea pre-2022. That idea that the political leadership will run, the army or the armed forces will surrender, the people will.
Обдзвоніть, будь ласка, Гуліченка, Мусієнка.
О, хтось включив мікрофон. Колеги, прохання відключити мікрофон.
So that idea, it was clear that is not going to happen. Why? Because it was clear between 2014 to 2022 that Ukraine has told the allies, we have plan B. Crimea fell, you did not bring it back. By April, and by the summer, there was the first Ukrainian counteroffensive happened then. And it succeeded in liberating Kramatorsk, Slovyansk, Mariupol, other towns and cities in the Donbass. And by one account, and I did the math, by one account, Ukraine fired more ammunition on the Russian Federation in the occupied territories between 2014 and 2022, more than the entire ammunitions arsenal between the Baltics and the Mediterranean, the Baltics and the Black Sea, sorry. So between Estonia and Bulgaria, their entire arsenal of ammunition will probably run out in the first 2 months, the first 2 years, 2014, 2015. So Ukraine fired all of that. So it was clear that Ukraine is going to fight. Crimea would not happen again. Okay. So you think this would deter someone? It did not deter. So enhance the deterrence. Same thing with the case of in the Middle East, in the case of Gaza. 7th of October, if you looked at the trajectory, this would be like the sixth war. So 2009, 2012, 2014, 2019, 2021, then in the middle, a few scrimmages. And then 2023 happened. The entire spectrum in these confrontations, the outcomes were not a win for Hamas. They lost more in terms of loss exchange ratio, so they lost more. And they came out politically a bit more destabilized, even internally destabilized, meaning that other factions were saying, okay, so they're not performing well, we should take the governance and we will fight better. So like Islamic Jihad, for example. So other factions within Gaza, within Gaza, non-Hamas factions are seeing the performance has not been going well, neither militarily nor politically. Economically, it was going well. So economically, it was the situation in Gaza was not bad because the Israeli approach was basically create more affluence and create more rivalry between different factions, and therefore they will be happy with the affluence, busy with the rivalry, and they will not bother us. So that was the approach. And many of the payments that were coming from Qatar was coming through Israeli banks. So it was transferred through Israeli bank with the permission and the support of Benjamin Netanyahu's government. So that was if you think about it, so deterrence did not really work because you did not do well in the previous confrontations, and then you still managed to launch the 7th of October, which unleashed all types of dynamics in the region. So the recession of deterrence. And deterrence, I had like a short PowerPoint, but I'm not going to bother you. We have 11 forms of deterrence from by denial, by punishment, by resistance, by risk. So we have 11 types of it. The entire I went one by one. The entire spectrum is undermined in that way. The third, this is more tactical, operational, and it affects our thinking about operational art. So it has been a steady decline in the capability of a stronger force, whether it's a state against a non-state, so the state being the stronger force, non-state being the smaller one, or a state against a middle power or a smaller power. Steady decline in the victories of the strong. And if you looked again at the data and the stats in the 19th century, if a state fought a militia, fought a non-state force, the state had a chance to win 90% of the time. Fast forward to 1976 onwards, the state against a smaller force, whether a non-state or a smaller state, it wins only in about 25% of the time. The rest of the times, they need to negotiate, which means that they cannot win militarily. And in many cases, the non-state wins. The last being the Taliban and the coalition of the anti-Assad coalition in Syria. So the non-state wins militarily. So Sandinistas in Nicaragua in 79 are not the exception. You know, that was the trend. to win by the smaller side. And why did that happen? One of the main reasons is that the technological capacity, and Ukraine knows that quite well, the capacity to advance technologically will somehow flip your chances against defeat because you manage to technologically innovate and adapt to the stronger force, especially being the smaller side, the quicker side. And if we enter a bit more on the tactical, what we call the kill chain, the sensor to shooter timing, the detection destruction timing is becoming more and more faster. So if you detect by the sensors, you're able to precisely hit. And if you precisely hit, you're able to kill. The detection destruction time is quite fast, and it's happening on the smaller side more than the bigger side. And you can see that clearly with the chain that the kill chains that are employed, for example, in Ukraine by aerial drones or sea drones. But that has been happening for a while. It's more of a trend. And in the Middle East, the Ambassador Kuzmenka showed my book on how ISIS fights. Actually, there's a Ukrainian version, so I have to give you that version. And in the Ukrainian version, the first chapter is how Putin's army fights like ISIS, like a terrorist group in Ukraine. So this is the introduction of it, and I'm doing some comparisons there. But back to the technological dimension, the first non-state force, smaller force, that was able to break the US consistent air supremacy or air superiority. So the US has been dominating the air domain of operations since April 1953. It was never attacked from the air since April 1953 in the Korean War. The ones that broke this was not China or Russia, it was ISIS in Mosul. They fielded 70 drones under the air supremacy of the United States, so below 3,000 feet. And all these drones were carrying either IEDs or grenades, and they dropped them. So in a way, they undermine that supremacy. And this is part of how they get the drones, how they, partly what I was talking about, innovation and adaptation under pressure in terms of and technological advancement and the breaking of the state's capability and the monopoly on firearms and other weapons and munitions. Okay, final two thoughts. And this is related to also the Middle East and here. The losses, because of all of what I mentioned, the alliances, the deterrence, the smaller side being able to pull upsets against the bigger side, does not just apply to the West. So it's not just the Taliban or ISIS against the West, or it's not just that. It's the other side is suffering as well. Russia is a case in point in Syria. Syria was a strategic defeat, although they maneuvered, so they kept the two bases. They lost one base in Kamishli, the smaller one, but they kept Hamimim and Tartus, the air base and the maritime base. But also they're having troubles with their alliances. So in Sudan, for example, that support for the RSF, the Rapid Support Force, well, long story, a tribal militia that was turned into a regular army force, and then now involved in a civil war, and very adaptive civil war, because they're striking hundreds of kilometers away on command post of the regular Sudanese army with drones. So they're also adapting quite fast. Their support, the relationship with the Wagner Group and with Russia was undermined, and now Russia is competing to have better relations with the Sudanese government and armed forces, or government between quotations, because it's a bit up in the air at the moment. So Russia in the Middle East is also suffering multiple defeats, whether in Syria, in Sudan, and then in Africa. You all know about the cases in Mali, the defeat of the Wagner Group in the north, and in Mozambique, where they were, let's say, jungle warfare is not their forte. So there's also multiple defeats there and multiple struggles there, and of course it has implications here. So a bit more of a struggle there, and I'm happy to talk a bit about it. Final 2 points on Ukraine and the Middle East in terms of the opportunities and the challenges. I think Ukraine represent a model in terms of defense, in terms of security, in terms of structural reforms, whether on the political level or the anti-corruption and structural economic societal level, and also on the level of tolerance within the society, and I can speak a bit about that. And these are all issues that the many countries in the Middle East struggle with, starting from the high politics, from the defense and security affairs, all the way to the societal relationships, shall we say, interreligious dialogue, tolerance, and so on. And I think that it would be a very good idea to share some of these lessons in multiple discussion forums with the region. Why? Because also the knowledge, and Professor Haran was just visiting us in Doha, and I think he sensed that quite clearly, that on one end, the knowledge about Ukraine is minimum, and the amount of Russian propaganda is maximum. Okay, so you're constantly struggling with narratives that basically are a part of Russian propaganda, and you're playing kind of catch with them. You're trying to dismantle them. So my suggestion is to flip it around, to take the initiative, give more of a Ukrainian vision, and whenever these arguments come up, the Russian narrative arguments come up, they can always be dismantled and easily dismantled. And part of the story, I think we had this discussion multiple times, that this belief that the Soviet Union is Russia. And you try to explain that the Soviet Union was 15 states, and Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. And most of the military and defense instructors that helped liberation struggles in the Middle East were actually Ukrainians. In 1970, in the War of Attrition, the only direct confrontation between Israel and the Soviet Union, 3 pilots were shot over Sinai. I think at least one of them was Ukrainian. So basically, the legacy of the Soviet Union in that region, if it was upheld, should not be totally monopolized by Russia. But many of these issues come up, and many of them needs to be addressed with the stressing of the keywords that what Ukraine is facing now is a war of aggression. It's an anti-colonial resistance to a former empire. That former empire dislocated and ethnically cleansed and forcibly deported, all these are buzzwords, the people of Ukraine. And parts of the Middle East suffered from that. So the solidarity should be with the victim of that aggression, not with the aggressor. And Russia remains an empire in that sense. I'll stop here because I am already out of time, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll leave it to Ambassador Ostash and Professor Nazarenko.
Thank you very much, dear Professor, for your very impressive presentation. And now we are moving forward with the next presentation. I would like also to give the floor to our next speakers, Roman Nazarenko, Director of the Institute of Religion and Society at the Catholic University, Ukrainian Catholic University. By the way, he initiated this meeting and helped us organize it, and I truly value our cooperation and partnership. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, we agreed before the meeting that I will be really short with my presentation in order to save the time for the discussion and perhaps the reply from Omar. So, but anyway, we will stay on the strategic level path. And I think we are all agreed that if the 20th century was, let us say, the century of territorial wars, the 21st century is the century of the hybrid confrontation. And the hybrid confrontation is not only about missiles, it's not only about the tanks or military, let us say, hardware, but it is also about the narratives, about the religion, about the identity. And what is the most significant from my point of view is the strategic communication. This is why the strategic communication matters profoundly for both Ukraine and MENA region, Middle East even. We are far more interconnected than we sometimes assume. And Ukraine and many Middle Eastern countries share exposure to proxy warfare, external interference, religious, let us say, instrumentalization, energy and food security that Omar mentioned, and sophisticated informational operations, let us say. As Professor Ashur emphasized, what happens actually in Syria and Libya, Sudan, it is not, from my point of view, is isolated from what happens in Kherson or Donbass or my native region, Crimea. And very often we see the same actors, the same narratives, and frequently the same hybrid methods being applied in different geographical contexts. This brings me to a central question. What if deterrence that we are talking about today in the 21st century is not only military, but in a sense semantic or strategic communicative? So what do we see right now in the modern world? Religious narratives can be weaponized, even within our country. Perhaps you heard about the TSN report last week about one of the Muslim spiritual administration of Ukraine and the great manipulation and disinformation about this patriotic, if I may say, about the Islamic community organization. Forced deportations can be reframed as the protection in the modern world. Occupation can be described as stabilization. And information campaigns can portray Ukraine, especially in the Middle Eastern public discourse, as merely the Western proxy and being rather as an object controlled by the West rather than a subject, independent subject. In this sense, the strategic communication becomes part of the defense infrastructure. A state that cannot protect its narrative space, let us say, cannot fully protect its sovereignty. If Russia has faced strategic setbacks in Syria, Mali, or Libya, these were not only military changes. They were also legitimacy challenges. In hybrid conflicts, legitimacy is decisive as a firepower. So why Ukraine needs a dedicated MENA strategic communication policy? If we take this seriously, then Ukraine must move beyond the generalized global messaging. So Ukraine needs a dedicated, again, Middle East focused strategically communication policy. Not messaging, let us say, filtered exclusively through the Western frameworks, but communication built on our regional understanding, what actually Professor Ashur emphasized about our building our own policy in the Middle East. So cultural literacy is not an academic luxury, if I may say. It is security infrastructure. So graded education, regional expertise, language competence, and deep understanding of religious dynamics are part of national resilience and the components of the deterrence in the modern world, and especially in our country. Without the regional expertise, strategic communication becomes, if I may say, just a guesswork. So, and I would like to leave you with one final thought. We see forced deportations in Ukraine today. The Middle East has a long experience, let us say, with demographic engineering, displacement, and externally imposed territorial transformations. Can this shared historical trauma become not only a memory of suffering, both of our regions, but a platform for cooperation? Look at the example of the Qatar in the question of Ukrainian children that we are all aware of. The presence of Islamic community in our country, what sometimes people in Europe and especially in the Middle East don't realize, that we have not the minority of Islamic community, but the indigenous people that are present here more than 10 centuries. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why do we have the so strong mutual and peaceful coexistence between those communities. And we even joke sometimes when I met the religious leaders that the inter-religious dialogue in Ukraine is sometimes stronger than intra-religious. So that Muslims, or one of the Muslim community, can cooperate more with Greek Catholic or Orthodox than the other Muslim communities. The same with the Christian, actually. Cooperation with the military sector. Again, culture engagement. Omar mentioned Jamala concert that was prepared by the Ukrainian Institute in Doha, and it was really extremely successful. Food security, energy, agriculture, business, technologies, and actually IT direction. If this is truly a hybrid century, then our partnerships must also become hybrid. So military, informational, educational, and civilization. So Ukraine should not look at the Middle East only as a diplomatic frontier. That's for sure important, but it should see it as a strategic partner in this new century, navigating, let us say, hybrid era. So I think I'm on time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, dear Roman Nazarenko. Now we are going for questions and answers.
Yes, please.
Okay, the floor. Oh, we'll start with Professor Haran. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My question will go to Soshi. So I appreciate your presentation here for the first time. Very okay. So first of all, on the factual side, if I understood you correctly, you have said that the decision on the attack of October 7th was decisions of military leaders of Hamas inside the country.
No, the political leadership. So Yahya Sinwar, basically. So the political leadership of Hamas inside Gaza, which is not the international leadership, was not the political bureau outside, which is based in Doha, took that decision. And why do we know this? Because the Israelis captured the documents of communication between Sinwar and Haniya, who's the head of the political bureau. And apparently, Sinwar was offering a plan of trying to attack Israel from all sides, north, south, so north with Hezbollah, southwest from Gaza, foment an insurgency inside the West Bank, and do an uprising inside Israel proper. And so four sides, and then with the help of the Iranians. Haniya told him, forget it, like that's not gonna work. The Iranian is not supporting it, the Hezb is not supporting it. Basically, the Arab minority inside Israel will not rise for you, and forget it. And he carried on anyway.
Okay, so if other foreign players didn't agree on that, so what was the real decision for Hamas leaders to go on their own? Okay, so this is my first question.
Mhm.
Second is more provocative, like the question from the Israeli friends. You are talking about necessity to educate the audience in Qatar.
Mhm.
And we are trying to do it. We appear from time to time on Al Jazeera, but Russian resource, but we appear there mostly together with Russians,
Right.
So definitely Russian presence is greater. So we can approach with your help, diplomatic academy, right, in Qatar or some other institution. Okay, but anyway, Russian presence is much stronger, and it's very difficult, to combat it with our resources. And the main thing here, even if not only in Qatar, but let's take another they understand what's going on. They understand our moral reasoning, violation of territorial borders, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, they need Russia.
Yeah.
For some other reasons. So here's the question.
Okay.
What's
Mhm.
Why do they live in Russia?
solve issues in some other countries, they're balancing each other. I think I understand what
No, I understand.
Yeah. So these are two problems.
Yeah.
Maybe two problems. Tremendous question.
Well, yeah, I should. Okay, so thank you so much for that.
Question by question.
And you
One by
already.
one.
Hmm?
One by one, yes.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Thank you very much. On the first one, so the 7th of October, they did the breach. They succeeded tactically, but frankly, and this is an argument. I wrote a long piece on how Hamas fights, the title of it, and the conclusion was they had no strategy. There was no strategy, meaning that the objectives and the resources did not match at all. The attack was, they did not try to do it like ISIS style in terms of you raid the town, you fortify inside the town, and then now it's like the sequence: raid, fortify, occupy. So you raid the town, you fortify inside the town, and then now you become the defender, because now they will come to try to take it. Nothing like that. And if they even planned once in Sidrot police station, they tried to fortify inside the police station. But even with that, the ground lines of communications are cut. So this is exactly what the Israelis have done. They waited till they had no more ammo, and then even without ground lines of communication, they raised the building down on them. So the plan was, okay, you'll breach, and then what? So that's the issue. If there is no support, if there's no help is coming, then what? The entire force was about brigade size. The entire force, and this is not just Hamas. This is Hamas plus, because also they did not, when they infiltrated the wall, they did not secure the infiltration points. So now they entirely lost command over the entire operation, because everybody now gets in. And whoever has arms can get in, and he or she does not take orders from Hamas. So the operation now is out of control. So the argument is that yeah, they have agency, and it's similar to 9/11 in a way, because in 9/11, I mean, the Taliban was forbidding bin Laden from doing any operations outside of Afghanistan. Literally, they told him that. Still did it anyway. So you can have the small side, the weaker side, having agency without listening to the bigger guy, and then everybody else will face the strategic consequences. And this is exactly what happened. So now this is a series of 7 of October wars. The latest episode may about to unfold in Iran. So you see how the strategic interaction worked in that case.
So it wasn't really, planned. There was no planning for the future coming with this operation.
I think they thought so if I'm putting myself in Sinwar's shoes, I think he was thinking, we'll do it, and then they will come for help. So I will drag them into the fight. They don't want to fight, I'll drag them into the fight. I think this is what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my second question is about
Oh, the second question. I totally agree. Yeah. I totally agree. They don't need it, but there's 2 bits there. It's somehow there's a historical relationship. So countries, so the Middle East is very different. Even regions within the Middle East are very different. So the Gulf, for example, in Qatar, you've been there. The heart is with Ukraine, but the mind feels Russia. Mind feels Iran is across the borders. It's an ally of Russia. The last time, the last assassination attempt happened in the country was by 2 Russian agents. So Zalim Khan Yandarbayev, who was the provisional, at one point, provisional Chechen president from Ichkeria side. He was in Qatar in 2004, and they planted a bomb. 2 FSB agents, I think, planted a bomb inside his car, blew him up, and Qatar arrested them. So they arrested the agents, and there was a wrestling team in Moscow competing. So Russia arrested the wrestlers and basically said that they are terrorists, and now we do an exchange, and they had to do an exchange. So they know that it is difficult to. So that's why for Qatar, for example, the idea is we're thinking about maybe helping in the soft side. So education, media, demining, reconstruction, all these issues in that soft side. But hard side, the defense, security, we try to keep away from. UAE, for example, is endorsing the entire thing. The idea there is this is a model. A strong man who's like standing up to regional power. That's a model we can look up to. Algeria, for example, it's another country. They think that this is it is very strong in the culture that Russia is the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union helped us against the French, and later on. So therefore, we have to be with Russia. And no matter how much you try to undermine this narrative, so it still needs work. So it means that you must visit the Middle East and Doha more. So you're always welcome. We'll find resources. Don't worry. We'll find resources.
You pronounce Doha. You pronounce Doha.
Doha.
It's about Doha.
Ah,
One more.
sorry, yeah.
You pronounce Doha.
Doha, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doha czy Doha. Okay, it's just.
Okay.
Okay, I encourage you for more questions, but maybe we now switch to our guests online. No hands.
I think the ambassador Andrews is trying to.
Okay, please introduce yourself.
You
Yes.
spoke at length about the whole the Middle East, but mainly about the Arab countries. What's your opinion on what's going on now in Iran, inside Iran? From your perspective, on counterinsurgency or insurgencies, etc. Whether or not they have a chance, or what could be the circumstances that might lead to a regime collapse, aside, including also the current American threat, possibly some other factors.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked into more detail of this?
It's very difficult to get an outline. The forecasting is very difficult because there's so much going on. So it's not an insurgency yet inside Iran. It's not. So there are protests. Actually, some of it just happened inside the university. But the repression was very heavy. Apparently, tens of thousands were killed without a fight. And there was some arms involved, but mainly light arms. And there was the ethnic, I wouldn't call it the low-level insurgency. That's on the borders with the Kurds mainly, who got a bit of arming and apparently Baluchis and Kurds from in the northwest. The special operation forces from the US apparently got in and helped them a bit, but it's insignificant. Like the fight is in Tehran, in the big cities. The regime has cards. So in terms of cards, so it has multiple militias, so it's layered. So it has the Basij. I didn't see one defection neither in the the Revolutionary Guards, nor in the regular army. Both of them intact. Some people are saying, "Oh, the regular army will defect and maybe stage a coup." Not really. The regular army is not the regular army that was there in the 1980s and was not trusted by the regime, so they created the Revolutionary Guard to balance it. The regular army is well vetted, like the Revolutionary Guard, so most of the folks there are loyal to. So I didn't see any defections. Maybe there will be defections if there's enough pressure, maybe, but so far no defections. Now the only thing is the intervention, and even with that, the intervention, I don't know how will that affect the public opinion. So it may affect it in a way that, okay, we'll support it and we'll get rid of them. They already killed, tens of thousands. So even if the Americans, because the problem with the American interventions by force in the Middle East has a very bad record. American actually alliance in the Middle East without intervening has a good record. So in terms of saving Kuwait in 1991 or saving Qatar in 2017, so they were almost invaded, but the US stopped it. So in a way, they have a good record. But if you intervene by force inside a country to change a regime, the record is Iraq, and some may argue, although it was not them, in Libya. Even with the strike, so strike and then what? Well, Libya was strikes, and then what? The regime was toppled, but then what? So this is the worry.
My very modest conjecture is that if the strikes are heavy, then parts of this apparatus, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, primarily because we are the one that entity which effectively owns the country right now, will be routed. They may be shaking, and maybe on their kind of back foot, and at that moment of sort of unstable system, there might have insurgency. Because what I said when I visited Iran, the most recent time was in connection to the tragedy that we had in Ukrainian flag, which came down. I was part of the group that went to discuss it with the Iranian side, trying to sort it out. I had a chance to look around how young people behave, for instance. We were driven in official cars, delegation cars, and I caught more than once a look of hate, just because this is the government. And these guys are also the ones, they have multiple, there are millions of, maybe not thousands of them driving small bikes. And they undercut you deliberately, all the way, when you enter the city.
Right.
They undercut you just to show, that how much
They hate you.
Because we have this official delegation number in
Right.
plate number.
Right.
So there is a potential. In some ways, I think it's the case generally around in many different ways similar to Russia. It's like the Russia of the Middle East.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and the situation in Russia, I always incited this when I talk to people with Western experts, how do I see that the Russian situation may unfold? My positive moment, which is negative, of course, for Russia, is the manner in which Prigozhin's revolt was received with applause. And I think if someone like Prigozhin pops up in Iran, if that was an element of good organization, a smart kind of organization, better than Wagner's revolt in Libya, it has a chance.
Is it
Has
real?
a chance, but we don't know any name. We don't know. Same with Russia. It's also possible anytime. For this experience, what happened with Prigozhin can be.
It's real.
No, I'm the problem is,
Because the mood is there, but the matches are not real.
it can happen. So anything can happen, but it can happen. But the indicators so far is that the insurgency did not happen, the defections did not happen. If they maybe remove the Khamenei, the Ayatollah, if the regime is decapitated, and then you'll have a bit of a, but then you'll have equal heads.
No one, like the Khabib regime is not seen for a substantial amount of time, for instance. And then there's the breach of loyalties, maybe hesitation on some groups, but then the RGC. My other question to you, first, ask
Last one.
No, you're on the line several trends. There is one more trend which goes as a countercurrent, but it is pretty pronounced. The activities, the foreign external activities towards all the GCC countries. While the formal alliances or the classical alliances, just as you mentioned, are in retreat, like the UAE and once an ally of Saudi Arabia, and then found itself some business in Yemen, and still is very much immersed inside. Right? Same with Sudan and many places in Africa as well. So it looks like these active and also moneyed countries are trying to build up some muscle of their own, right? How do you assess that?
No, that's great. A great question. Can I go quickly?
Yes.
Yeah, because actually it relates to what Roman has said as well. This is all part of what you can call, it's an element of hybrid warfare. Why? Because what you just mentioned with the UAE and with the Russians, and they're all following the Iranian model in that sense, is that they're employing non-state forces because they're cheap and they're effective and they relate to also that adaptation for strategic influence. So you see that sustained in the UAE, in the case of Yemen, with the Transitional Council. You see it with Haftar in Libya, the Karama forces and what unfolded after that. And you saw it actually with the only country that is still supporting the RSF, the Rapid Support Force, which is basically committed crimes against humanity, committed multiple genocidal practices, basically. The only country that's still financing it, indirectly delivering drones, not directly, but indirectly delivering drones. So buying it via China, giving it to the Central African Republic giving it to the RSF. So that link is still the UAE. And where did they learn this? Because they followed Russia in the war of the Donbass in 2014, 2015, or 2014.
With Russia.
in that, yeah, in learning the TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, probably. Or they modeled it via the Iranians, because the Iranians started this very early on with Hezbollah in Lebanon. So the Iranian model is, it's not the Cuban model. The Cuban model is you support until they get to power. So Cuban supported the Sandinistas until they defeated the Somozas and they take Managua. So they take the capital by force. And others, they attempt, as Fidel Castro used to say, we tried everywhere in Latin America except for Mexico. So they try to basically support an unstable force, a Marxist-Leninist unstable force, until it gets to the capital, a la Cuba, a la Havana, 59. The Iranians are, no, we're not interested to get you in the capital. And Russian is the mix, but I'll talk about the Iranians. The Iranians are interested in you don't govern, but you rule. So you have a veto in high politics, Hezbollah, veto in Lebanese politics, but I'm not the government. You can demonstrate against the government. I'm not there. The exception, which is not under control, I think, is that of the Houthis. The Houthis managed to get to the capital and take it, and the relationship ebbs and flows. With Russia, I think it's a Grasimov idea that he laid out. So you get support, and then you support first the demonstrators, people who call for Russia to come for legitimacy, and then you escalate with the proxies. And then if the proxies fail, which they probably will fail because they did not invest in them as Iran invested in Hezbollah. So when they fail, we'll come with the regulars, but the regulars are without a flag. Yeah. So it's part of the entire habit.
Thank you very much. My question is about our ambassadors. What about Qatar and Jordan? Are you here as Ambassador Kuzmenko? Would you like to say a couple of words? Okay. No.
Yeah, well, I do. The question is, what about Qatar and Jordan?
No. I just asked about our ambassadors to Qatar and Jordan. If you are online still, okay, you can.
Yes, of course.
Take the floor. You can take the floor, please. Yes.
If I can, yeah. Qatar. First and foremost, I would like to extend the gratitude for our distinguished lecturer for very interesting and very open discussion, very interesting and very topical questions the light were raised on during this lecture. Indeed, Qatar is one of the most important and I would presume the most pro-Ukrainian actor of the Gulf region. We do enjoy the humanitarian assistance, the political assistance, and the most important, the only country of the region which really took part in the return of the Ukrainian kids stolen by the Russians. Actually, 83 lives were saved. But nonetheless, Qatar is the strategic ally of the United States, and in certain extent, it correlates the policy, including the one vis-a-vis the Ukrainian-Russian war, with the similar position of the United States. And if at the very first stage of this war, at the very beginning, we were mainly hearing the statements of the official Doha about the need to comprehensively implement the international law, need about the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Now we do see a bit shift of emphasis according to the US position. This position is a bit difficult for Ukraine, I mean the US one, and it is a bit echoing in the position of the state of Qatar, since it also called upon to the immediate ceasefire, immediate long-lasting peace, And the rhetoric about the international law and territorial integrity, unfortunately, is not so active as it used to be. But despite of that, we do feel the very friendly support of Ukraine from the Qatar, which also expects to take active part in the Ukrainian post-war restoration. They do have the necessary experience, they do have necessary fundings, but the crucial position is we will come, but the next day after the peace will be established. Bearing this in mind, we, especially as the embassy of Ukraine to the state of Qatar, we proceed from understanding of the primary necessity to keep as active contacts and as an active tie with these small but very prosperous and streamlined in the future Emirates. It will be the extremely important part of the post-war. I'm talking about the post-war already, post-war reconstruction and policy of Ukraine, the comprehensive involvement of our Qatari friends and partners, which are not standing aside of the issue, and we do have variety of projects are being implemented in the social field and funded by Qatar now. So, without further ado, let me thanks for the attention to this small, but as I said, very important country of Gulf. I would like to extend my very good friend, Ambassador Ostash, for taking the leadership in this discussion. And I do hope to continue this run in the future. And also my personal thanks to my both friends, lecturers, attended this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Dear friends, no questions? The last question. Oh, and Olena online.
Yes.
Olena Solovyova and you. Okay, please
There's
introduce yourself. Yes. Ladies first. Olena Solovyova.
Yes, hello.
Hello,
Can you hear
hello.
me?
Yes, go ahead.
قبل كل شيء اسمحوا لي أن أشكركم سعادة الدكتور عمر ورمان نازارينكو على تقاريركم الرائعة. أنا مدرسة اللغة العربية سابقة من أوكرانيا، وأريد أن أهنئكم ببداية رمضان الكريم الذي تزامن اليوم مع الصوم الكبير عند المسيحيين.
شكرا.
She speaks Arabic better than I do. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much for your report. It's very interesting. Now I have two questions for two speakers. First, for Dr. Amar, may I ask you, the first one, could the deepening military cooperation between Russia and Iran serve as catalyst for Arab states to reconsider their neutral stance on the war on Ukraine? And the second is, what political, economic incentives could encourage Middle East states to move from more neutrality toward more proactive position for supporting Ukraine in the international area? Thank you.
Thank you, Olena. Professor, the floor is yours.
So the first one is the Russian-Iranian alliance would push Middle Eastern countries to be more supportive of Ukraine. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So difficult. Why? Because it's not as straightforward as it looks. The Iranian relationship with the Gulf and with multiple Middle Eastern country ebbs and flows in a way, and it's seen as more of a when it ebbs, it's about Iranian support to non-state forces in the region, and more or less attempting to change some of the destabilize some of these regimes. When it flows, it's more or less about economic cooperation and for example, Qatar shares a huge gas field with Iran. It's a 50-50 kind of cooperation. So in that, so that explains why, for example, Saudi, the UAE, Qatar, and others, Kuwait specifically, are unwilling, are not very supportive for the US strikes, mainly because they're worried about ebbing to the extent that it wouldn't be just non-state forces, but it would be Iranian ballistic missiles on their capitals as well. And they're not ready for that. So, they're not, and this is one lesson Ukraine can provide in terms of air defenses, how to last that long in terms of defending the airspace. So the Gulf is not ready in that aspect at all, despite sophisticated systems and despite everything else. So that's one. It's not as straightforward as it looks, unfortunately. On the two, the economic, you're asking about the economic cooperation between between Ukraine and the Gulf or other Middle Eastern countries.
The Middle East.
Roman, you want to say something about that, or yes? No? Okay. So yeah, basically, it's not my forte, but the main issue of focus is energy security specifically. And in that sense, I think Ambassador Kuzmenka perhaps can chime in on the attempted cooperation in that sector, especially with regards to providing gas and energy security for Ukraine on one end, and also other aspects when it comes to food security specifically from Ukraine to multiple Middle Eastern countries in that sense, plus the technological cooperation, and that flow is coming also from Ukraine to the Middle East. And the final area, and maybe also Ambassador Kuzmenka would like to give some details on that, is also defense cooperation, because there's some of that going on, especially in Qatar. I had one student who was training, and he's training with Ukrainian. He's an officer in the armed forces, and he's training with Ukrainian equipment, and he needs to visit the embassy every now and then to get permissions. So, but maybe Ambassador Kuzmenka can say more about that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. It's maybe one more question, because it looks like no connection.
Polas Director Center for National Resilience Studies. Professor, thank you very much for your presentation. I very much agree with you about Russia is monopolizing Soviet legacy. I personally remember our professor from military training courses in Taras Shevchenko University who served as a military interpreter during 1973 war in Sinai. My question would be about Russia and Syria. You mentioned Russia is losing influence in Syria, Sudan, Somalia. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on this?
So in Syria, it was a strategic defeat. Like Russia came in Syria basically to keep a regime in power. That regime is now playing. The head of the regime is playing war games or video games in Moscow. So the regime is defeated. Most of the militias and the units, because they invested in a mix of militias. Some of them even were the Fatimiyun, for example. That was an Afghan militia that was brought in by Iran, made up of Iranian refugees, sent and expanded to become a division strong. And then the Russians managed to recruit the head of it because it was very effective. So they managed to recruit the head of it. But they invested in all of that, and all these investments are gone now. And they invest even in the infrastructure of the Tartus maritime base to expand it. All this is gone in a way. But they maneuvered. They somehow muddled through because they are the current regime is more pragmatic than we thought, and despite the resistance from the society, because the society remembers what Russia has done in Aleppo and what Russia has done in other places in Syria, and despite resistance from its own field commanders and some of the politicians as well, the head of the regime decided to go in less confrontational, more cooperative ways. Not like Assad, but somehow so it was not, I would say it was a strategic military defeat in a way, but there's some political maneuvering going on that with the aim to keep some of their main assets, which is in Tartus and Hamimim, basically. But they withdrew from Kamishli, but that was the small base up in the northeast of Syria. So that's in Syria. In Sudan, they relied on so in Syria they wanted to keep the regime. In Sudan they betted on the militia, on the group that was trying to. Sudan is a bit complicated. Previously there was a president. The president was conducting counterinsurgency in a region called Darfur to fight a counterinsurgency on the cheap, meaning that he pays less and have irregulars on the local irregulars. He managed to recruit a local militia there, and that local militia expanded. They were extremely brutal. They were fighting in very primitive ways, including their mobility was on horses and camels, but they were effective because they were right on the spot and they were brutal. And they would do collective punishments. They committed crimes against humanities and so on. So that militia, because of their success in counterinsurgency, between quotations, they became part of more or less one of the largest units within the regular army. So they had ranks, and they were called the Rapid Support Force, the title is misleading. It's sort of in military language, it's a QRF force. It's a quick reaction force. So, but they're called the Rapid Support Force, and then they became a division. A division was within the army, and even now a corps level within the regular army. And then they staged a coup against the president who created them, with the help of the regular army. And the two heads went in different directions. So after they removed Bashir, the president, they are fighting with the commander of the armed forces, their leader against the leader of the commander of the armed forces. So two generals are kind of fighting it. Russia chose Hemeti, chose the head of the RSF for a while. Why? Because apparently he had control of multiple gold mines in Darfur. And in exchange for the gold, which is very useful in terms of the economic adventurism of Russia at the moment to get away from the sanctions. In exchange for that, Wagner would train his troops and give them some tactical training and help him with the operation level planning and so on. And you can see some of the Wagner tactics employed in that sense. And also, I don't know about the drones. The drones came later, but they may have given him some training on drone warfare as well, because they have been very effective to the extent they were striking from Darfur in the other end of Sudan, so about 1,000 kilometers away, been striking munition depots, been striking command posts, so long-range precision strikes for a militia that was fighting on camels a few years ago. So that's a big transformation. For some reason, they switched sides. And I think they switched sides partly because Ukraine was also present in Sudan, supporting the other side, in an attempt to atterrit the Wagner and the others. So I think they switched sides to deny Ukraine that influence. Now the state that remains with the RSF is the UAE, the only state that is with it. But this can change at any point in time. So you had two losses that in a way muddled through. So they're trying to deal with the losses as well.
Thank you, Professor. Okay, it's time to.
And does Ukraine have a strategy in Sudan? Because I was talking with investor of Sudan, and it's a ban, and he said that Ukrainian line is also cheap.
Ukraine.
Maybe you can
comment on that. Yeah. I think it has a strategy. It has a strategy across the entire Middle East, which is undermine what Russia is trying to do there, because in a way it's a zero-sum game. If you leave them there, so what do they get from the Middle East? They get influence, they get resources, whether in terms of gold, they escape the sanctions. They conduct they have companies that escape, that comes from Europe, register in the Middle East, do their activities via the Middle East, and it's a Middle Eastern company, and now you escape the sanctions. So it's a loophole. And then they do the narrative. Basically trying to charm the officials and the non-officials for support. So I think Ukraine's strategy is deny them all that. It's an area denial strategy. That's an area you need to deny the extraction of resources and influence from that, because what happens is these resources turn into ballistic missiles and drones over Ukraine afterwards.
If Russia tactics change without support this or that force, does it mean that Ukrainian tactics will also change?
Will change. I don't think the Ukraine will support the RSF in any time. They're still with the government, but then it's a competition on what can Russia extract from the government, and if Ukraine can sabotage that extraction at any point.
Okay, thank you very much. We are out of time, unfortunately.
Sorry about that.
We would like to complete our
Yes.
discussion. And I'd like to say that for me, as a former ambassador to the region, to the Middle East, actually, I covered, as you know, Lebanon and Syria. It was a great pleasure. It was a great pleasure. And my final remarks will be very brief. I'd like to express my gratitude to both speakers, Dr. Ashur and Dr. Nazarenko. Of course, to our ambassadors in Qatar and in Jordan. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. And my thanks coming to our team and staff of the Diplomatic Academy. I mean, Yulia Stavitska, Natalia Oberti, Andriana Bila, Pan Andriy, дуже дякую вам. And of course, finally, I'd like to thank all of you, our great audience, for fantastic time we spent together. And I'd like just to say, see you again at the Diplomatic Academy. Thank you very much. Have a good day.